Hello and welcome to your perfect 8-minute Yokohama experience. Yokohama is one of the largest populated cities in Japan and is right next to the sea. I travelled about 400 kilometers from Shiga to be here, and I was very excited to present numerous tours on Heigo. To be honest, 8. 8's the magic number of the day. The first stop in our grand adventure series was to Kamonyama Park. It was once known as Railway Hill and these days is famous for cherry blossom viewing. But for me, I needed to visit because it has a connection with Hikone Castle in Shiga. And that is noted with the statue of Ii Naosuke that you'll see coming up shortly. But there were just some beautiful blossoms around. It was kind of gloomy that morning. This tour started at about 8 a.m. But we did see many critters, including a squirrel, a mouse, a bunch of pigeons, and some more squirrels, so that was cool. Here is the statue of Ii Naosuke. This is actually the reconstructed version that was created after World War II, because before then the previous one was used for scrap metal, importantly, of course. Next up, I found myself a little spot in the local library to charge things, and you wouldn't believe it, out of all of this space, someone chose to sit directly in front of me. Why? Next up, we went to the zoo. This was the second tour, and here I tried to remind my voyagers of the importance of recreation, research, education, and conservation. I realized that for some people, viewing online tours or other kinds of tours of zoos is quite distressing. And one of the reasons is that because us human type animals of course feel empathy towards others if we see them in boxes and cages and such. But I was really delighted to see that this free zoo that was available for the whole community to enjoy anytime and was filled with so many lovely children, many of which had notebooks, pens and paper and were eagerly writing down all of the little facts and bits of information about each of these very unique, interesting creatures. Now, my tour didn't actually feature the entire park, the entire zoo. It would have taken maybe 2, 3 or 4 hours. And what I really wanted to do on this day was give a kind of whistle-stop tour idea of all of the places that you could fit into one day if you came to visit Yokohama, which, by the way, only takes about 30 minutes to an hour to get to from Tokyo. This zoo is right in the heart of the city. It's the only one that is, and it's called Nogayama Zoological Gardens. There is also a park that you can walk your dog in around the entrance area. You're not allowed to take your dogs into the zoo though, and there is an extra flower garden at the end too, but we didn't view that during this day. Now, I'm sure you'll believe it when you get to the end of this video that I actually walked almost 40,000 steps in this day, which was equivalent to 26 kilometers. And I had packed to be able to travel throughout Tokyo for the next days after this, and I knew that it was going to be raining in Tokyo. In fact, it was meant to be raining my entire trip, only that wasn't true. So I packed shoes in accordance with waterproofness, but by this point in the series, when we got to the red brick building that's recommended by so many of the students that I teach here in Japan for all kinds of commerce. Basically, you can go shopping and eat great food and all kinds of things like that. My feet were hurting so much. I'm afraid I wasn't really making money on the tours. I couldn't really understand why. But people were delighted to see that there were some great a cappella music events happening, and it seemed to be a kind of glee sing-off. It was great to see so many Japanese people join together, hanging out and battling for the sake of music. We had a great time, needless to say. My fourth tour was one of 2 parks. The idea was that I would show off 2 gardens or parks in the space of one tour. We saw some really beautiful blossoms. This was at Yokohama's own park. And my plan after that was to take them down to the sea, them being the people watching, the voyagers on Heigo. But this park seemed to have a wonderful Japanese garden right next to it. So I decided to save my feet and not continue walking another 10 or 15 minutes down to the sea, which was taking me quite some time in that state that I was in. And we just enjoyed this lovely garden. We even got to hear droplets that were making music. We heard them through a bamboo pipe in the small garden. After I grabbed myself a bite to eat, finally, because down at the red brick buildings, because it was a public holiday, there was just no way I could get food in less than an hour. The queues were something else. And yeah, sure, I could have bought some food at the lovely Chinatown that we visited. This is the biggest Chinatown in all of Japan. And I guess the best bits were probably saved for my tours. But in between filming the live tours, I got a couple of shots of my own, and I hope you enjoy them. Gorgeous temples like these were quite something. There were fantastic gates and temples that were just decorated in blue and gold and red and green, and they're quite different to the Japanese style things that I'm used to seeing. Nearby, I climbed up a lovely mountain in hope of seeing a view of the harbour and the sunset. This was the Harbour View Park. And again, took some climbing. This was set to be my 6th tour, I think. There was a beautiful rose garden nearby that was also being used as a kind of herbs and fragrance garden. But sadly, the weather was miserable. So there was definitely no chance of my voyagers catching a glimpse of a sunset. And you know what? I decided I needed to take my shoes off yet one more time that day and just rest them on the coolness of the ground. So I got to see the sun go down, but not in any spectacular way. However, I think you'll agree the lights at night were something else. That area is very close to Chinatown, so I went back to do a nighttime version of that, and I think people really enjoyed it. Grabbed some great postcards. Afterwards, I slowly walked myself hobbling down towards the harbour side. This was the park I was intending to show earlier on in the day. It is called Yamashita Park, and that means the bottom of the mountain. The final tour of the day was at Cosmo World with all of its lights, where I accidentally gave a lecture on choosing shoes in Japan. Sorry about that. And then I made a 2-hour journey to my hotel in Tokyo.
Thank you for watching. Check out linktr.ee/MissKendalJames to support me and see what else I make.